Hey, Lioness. Welcome to the Lioness Method podcast for female business owners, entrepreneurs, and leaders who are passionate about growing their leadership skills, building amazing teams, and solving real life problems with a growth mindset. I'm your host, Nerrissa Hsu, Master Integrated Breakthrough Coach. And today we have the pleasure of speaking with the magical Laura Dawn. She's a microdosing and mindset mentor and shamanic life coach. She is, again, a microdosing mentor for executives and has been leading transformational retreats for over 10 years. And through her signature program and retreats, Laura Dawn weaves together science with wisdom to teach business and thought leaders, entrepreneurs, and creators how to mindfully explore psychedelics and sacred plant medicines as powerful visionary tools for inner transformation and creative manifestation. Through mindset and somatic coaching, she inspires people to truly expand the boundaries of what they believe is possible and embark on the path of heart-centered leadership to influence meaningful change. She has a degree in finance and entrepreneurship and has over 2 decades of exploring altered states of consciousness. And currently, she is completing a master's in science, specializing in creativity studies and change leadership, exploring the intersection between psychedelics, leadership, and creative problem solving to help individuals and teams unlock innovative solutions to the complex challenges that we face. So welcome, Laura Dawn, coming to us live from Hawaii today.
Thank you so much for having me, Nerissa. It's such a pleasure to be here.
No, it's wonderful. I am so excited to have this conversation with you because I love what you do. It sounds so interesting, the combination of psychedelics and leadership. And I really, from the clients that I work with, I think that it's something that's top of mind of just about every leader right now, because there is definitely a boom and an expansion in our consciousness where leaders are becoming aware that these tools are available and are looking for practitioners that not only have the knowledge for integration, but the application of how they might be useful in growing their business. So I would love to get started just by having you share a little bit more about what you do and how you serve them.
Sure. Yeah. So, gosh, what I do is how long do we have? We have a couple hours to cover that. Well, I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. I'll just give you a little bit of background to get to, where I am today. But yeah, I was also raised by 2 entrepreneurs. I'm the youngest of 4 children, and my both of my parents were very encouraging of us to always just see the possibility and see possibility when it's not in front of you, that you have to take those leaps in your mind and flex that visionary capacity that we all have to lean into possibility. And so it was very much encouraged as children. We were pitching business ideas at a very young age. By the time we reached dessert, it was like, okay, what do you got to put on the table? And so that I feel grateful that was very strong lens, that for which I was able to grow up in, and to have parents that always told me, whatever you see in your mind, you can create in reality. And my dad used to say that to me a lot. And that really is the foundation of you just mentioned it earlier about this podcast is, it's the foundation of what a growth mindset really is. And so I had my first high dose psilocybin experience when I was about 14, 15. So it's been over 20 years, almost 22 years. Gosh, I'm getting older. Since I've been working with these just amazing, incredible sacred plants that help us literally to move beyond our current construct of who we think we are, what we think we're capable of, what we think we're deserving of, what we think we're worthy of, and allow us to think bigger. And so it's been very much a parallel track almost my whole life, working as an entrepreneur and, really just leaning into life in a very playful way as well. I built my first online brand to 1.5 million people on Facebook that was all about spreading positivity. And we ended up selling that brand, and I ended up building a volcanic hot spring retreat center from scratch with my bare hands and my ex-partner.
That's quite an undertaking.
It was quite an undertaking. It really just forged me into the woman that I am today. It was such a big undertaking, and I learned an enormous amount through that process. And I've been leading transformational retreats for 10 years, and I've been just evolving, and I think that's the key, is that we never really arrive. We're always in an evolution in our own lives, and therefore, we're always up leveling our offerings. And so I've been working with people with microdosing for many years. I started microdosing like many, many years ago myself. And in the past 10 years, I've really been cultivating more of what does it mean to cultivate a practice, and a ritual practice, basically, to be able to show up and cultivate these mindsets and embodiment of the life that we want to be living. And so a lot of the work that I'm doing now is not just educating around microdosing, but combining that for leaders. I work with people, C-suite people. I work with leaders in a variety of domains. I work with a lot of people, leaders in the psychedelic space, microdosing coaches, integration coaches, and also just really applying this sort of framework and the modalities that I've developed over the years as a powerful combination, that when we work with deeper dive psychedelics or with microdosing, that we have these like windows of cognitive flexibility. We're in this heightened state of mental flexibility. And that's where we're able to sort of shake the neural snow globe, as some people would say, that there's a little
Oh,
bit
I
more.
love that. Shake the neural snow globe. And I would love to just stop you just for a minute, because you are going full on in, and I love it. But it brings up so many questions. Because I think traditionally, when you think, because you're bringing up, that you work with C-suite executives, and that you work with leaders and people that are looking to expand their creativity, that it might not necessarily occur to some C-level executives that this is a tool that's even available for them. Because I think like using plant medicines, or working with a plant medicine, building a relationship with one, hasn't really been the mindset of the past, right? How do you kind of approach that in dealing with people that are brand new to working with these tools, and may not have the the background to understand the difference between buying a bag of mushrooms from a friend that they know, and having an experience and working with a practitioner, somebody with a depth of knowledge like yourself?
Oh, yeah. I think that, times are changing so rapidly. So a lot of people find me through my website or my podcast, the Psychedelic Leadership Podcast. So if people are, searching for a podcast with the word psychedelic and leadership, which is a lot of the work that I'm doing, people are finding me, and so I'm not really, and I'm not in the business of ever trying to convince anyone of anything. And I also don't have the
Yeah.
mindset that everyone should be, working with any substances. So a lot of people come to me already sort of game on, ready to explore. And
Okay.
I do think that when we look at just so much of the science and so much of the research that's coming out now in very reputable journals, and that we can see that psychedelics are incredibly efficacious for a variety of things. And so
Mhm.
the most of the conversation, it is interesting because, most of the conversation right now in the psychedelic space is very focused on treatment for PTSD, for depression, for anxiety, for addiction. Very, very helpful, because, this is what has led towards the opening of FDA approval and such. We have people in the field like Rick Doblin, who's been working on this for decades at this point, and so things were really at that tipping point. What I'm really interested in is a more refined conversation, not refined, but a sort of subset conversation that focuses on looking at how we can combine psychedelics and microdosing specifically to foster better leadership skills and enhance our creative problem solving. And that, I do believe that the conversation is going in that direction. For people listening,
Definitely.
if you've ever struggled with depression or addiction, I have in my life. So I have a lot of empathy and compassion for people who are working with that. That after we go through those sort of portals of transformation on the other side, and plant medicines were instrumental in my own healing, then I
Mhm.
talk to a lot of people who have the same feeling of like, now what? Now that I'm not spending all of my days, in rumination around addiction or depression, that it's kind of like stepping out of a small dark room and looking at the big world and being like, now what? Okay, like,
Yeah, what do I
and
create
that's how
from
we,
here now that I have this opportunity to do so, right? That's exciting.
yeah. Yeah, and I think that that's a part of the waking up. So many people, we're facing a meaning crisis, we're facing a mental health crisis, and for good
Hmm.
reason. I think that, like, I heard someone say the other day, if you're not paying attention, then you're likely to not be depressed because of what's going on in the world today. So it's and we gain meaning and purpose and fulfillment by engaging with life, by creating something, by offering something, by connecting with other people. And when we
Hmm.
go through those experiences of depression and mental illness, it's very cut off. We sort of, it's like that, more of like that self isolation that happens. And so the healing process is like stepping out and reaching out and engaging with life. And I do think
Hmm.
that plant medicines really help us do that.
I love that so much. I'm a person in recovery, and I believe that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety; it is connection. So what you're speaking right now just resonates really strongly for myself, and I'm sure that the person listening. And addiction can mean a lot of different things, but I love that you're talking about the next stage of the evolution, right? And before we get there, I would love to know a little bit more about like what type of challenges you had to overcome to build your business and to serve in the way that you do.
Oh my gosh. I mean, had to overcome or still overcoming. I mean, I think that that's just the part and parcel with the gig, like being an entrepreneur, there's always something, but having that mindset that we are capable of overcoming all the challenges that come our way. Depression and addiction have been definitely big landmarks of overcoming. And healing all of our, healing my wounds of, yeah, not good enough, I would say, is also probably a big one that I speak to so many people who also struggle with this. I mean, gosh, there's so many levels that we could go on, the personal level or like the business front. I mean, we were just talking before I popped on that someone popped up an imposter Instagram account. And so, like, that's what I'm dealing with this morning, is like someone else posing as me on Instagram and now having my Instagram account shut down, and things like that we're always sort of overcoming. But some of the big ones have been coming out of the psychedelic closet a few years ago publicly in a big way. That's been definitely the path of fire. And it's
Mhm.
also taught me an enormous amount about what it means to stand in my truth, what it means to own my authentic voice. And I think I'm still always leaning into that voice. Um, Balance, I love to create, and sometimes I'll just push and push and push and push until I'm like, okay, I'm getting to that edge. So I also talk to a lot of people who find it really hard to slow down and to create space for self-care, self-nourishment time.
Mhm. And I also believe like that self-care, that self-nourishment is where the creativity begins to flow, right? That's where it all begins to kind of stem from. Now, I'm so
100%.
interested from your perspective to learn more about how you feel creativity and psychedelics are linked and how that can help an entrepreneur or somebody, a leader in business, really grow their teams or efficacy, their bottom line ultimately. Like how does that translate for your clients?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I feel like a little bit averse to frame it as, can we leverage psychedelics to improve our bottom line? There's something about, yeah, maybe I'll explain a little bit and then I'll circle back around to that. And more focusing on I think more framing it around, I think a big thing that I notice right now is that a lot of people show up to psychedelics with this notion of, what can you do for me? Help
Hmm.
me, heal me, make me better, make me more creative, make me do all these things that I can, be a better person. But ultimately, it's like this. I feel like the attitude and the reframe is showing up to our altars and saying, how can I serve this wisdom and this intelligence in the world? And I think that that's a really powerful reframe for a lot of people. And sort of, so to sort of separate those things out, I feel when we look at the conversation, just linking back into what I was just saying about how so much of the conversation is focused on depression, for example. So when you think of depression as being this like very tight ruminative loop, okay, what makes psychedelics efficacious for treating depression are also the same underlying neural mechanisms for which psychedelics help to increase creative thinking. Because when you're in a ruminative loop like depression or addiction or PTSD, you have to think a new thought to sort of get off the hamster wheel, right? So when we think of it that way, it's sort of the same, we can apply the same sort of thought behind that. And as I said, we go into these phases of increased cognitive flexibility. So a lot of Dr. Robin Carhart-Harris's work talks about, that psychedelics help the mind become more plastic, more plasticity, heightened plasticity. So that's a ripe territory for thinking outside the box, for
Oh,
what we call
100%. Have you also
searches.
seen the Netflix special on fungi with Paul Stamets? They actually just released a new one and it's amazing. I love that. I highly
No, I haven't seen
recommend for
the
the
new
listener
one
to
yet.
check it out.
Yeah, so I think the other sort of thing to really help to keep in mind is this notion that psychedelics are this incredibly powerful tool. They're almost like this Swiss Army knife with millions of add-ons. And so now we know that set and setting is easy to understand, right? It refers to the environment that we journey in, whether we're microdosing or macrodosing or mini dosing, that psychedelics amplify what's already there. So we, and as you're a creative, we know things like the research behind flow states, for example. It's easier to get in flow when there's less cognitive load. So I don't really sit down and create if my desk is like a total mess. So things like that, we can know that psychedelics amplify what's already there. So setting is important, how we set up our space, keeping it clean, organized, who's there to support us in our journey. All of these things are important, whether we journey, at home or outside in nature. All of these settings have a huge impact on our journey. Same with mindset, which is set of setting. So set refers to mindset. And so we know that the attitudes, the beliefs that we show up with going into a psychedelic experience also largely affect the outcome. And so do I think that psychedelics can inherently make you a better leader? Maybe yes, maybe no. Do I think that if we create a framework and education and tools that are like a nest that support the psychedelic journey, that someone can put on the perceptual lens and say, my intention, which is part of set, my intention to go into this microdosing practice this morning or into, this journey is to foster greater empathy skills or compassion and which are incredibly valuable skill sets and emotional skill sets. Emotional intelligence is the primary skill set for leaders of our time. So if we look at the framework, I think is the most important thing. My earbuds just keep wanting to fall
Yeah,
out.
and I think you also said it in the beginning too. It's like I think there is kind of a mindset that comes with not having enough education, maybe, which is why I love having this conversation of coming to these tools and saying, "I want you to fix me. I want you to heal me," right? And I think that if you are coming to the tools and you're saying, "I'm ready to do the work," right? I'm ready to do the work and put in the effort to get to the empathy, to get to greater compassion, right? Being
Yeah.
open to kind of lay that down in front of it.
Yeah, and I think it's separating out the notion around like psychedelics to make more money, or to increase your bottom line. Because if you're focusing on just that end goal and sort of skipping the whole juicy in between part, that really is a byproduct of living a life on meaning and a life on purpose and enhanced creativity is going to be more successful financial abundance. But I think if we go from A to Z, like all the way to the end, and we just say, okay, I just want a journey to focus on, becoming wealthier, then I think that we actually risk increased narcissism, increased unnecessary risk taking, impulsivity, that we don't actually question, oh, is this actually what is my highest calling in my life? Like, is this what I'm here to do to serve the awakening and liberation of humanity, which is no small,
Mhm.
thing to talk about. So I'm really interested in how can we bring together like very, very high level leaders. And one of the things that I've been training in graduate school is advanced creative problem solving facilitation for teams, and like put
Mhm.
some of the big issues on the table that really have a focus on how is this benefiting humanity? How are we serving humanity through this without only, the personal increase in the bank account? I think is a good
Mhm.
way to frame it.
I love that explanation. I know I'm a huge proponent and believer in servant leadership, and that's really where true leadership is born, and that we really get to have that prosperity and the purpose driven life, right? Because we always talk about, oh, let's live with purpose, but truly, what is that, right? And I feel like this journey that you're describing will lead you or lead the person who's interested in going on this type of journey to that purpose in a really meaningful way where you can enjoy the whole journey and it's not just about the end game, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Amazing. Well, what are some books that you love that have changed your life around this subject that you might be able to share with the listener?
Oh gosh, some of my favorite books: "When Things Fall Apart" by Pema Chodron, anything by Brene Brown, "Dare to Lead," "Rising Strong," "The Gifts of Imperfection," anything by Dan Goleman, "How to Foster Emotional Intelligence," I think is incredibly valuable for today. Um, Amanda Blake, "Your Body is Your Brain," that's an incredible book. I think it's important, yeah, to looking at the combination of different modalities, especially when we look at, for example, microdosing. I say microdosing isn't like the thing that we're talking about. Consciousness is the
Mhm.
thing.
Now, just for the
Microdosing,
person that's listening, again, just to back up for 1 second, what's the difference between microdosing and macrodosing? Because you mentioned those two things earlier, and I wanted to bring that up.
yeah. So microdosing is taking a very, very, very small subperceptual amount. The
Mhm.
subperceptual piece is a little nuanced because
So
sometimes
is that
you
something that you
you
take every day or, just add it in, like,
yeah.
with your other supplements for health or
Well, again, it's when okay, so this does require backing up a little bit more. And I will say that I have a free 8-day microdosing course that covers a lot of the basics of how to get started with microdosing on my website, livefreelaurad.com. That's a good place to start because we won't be able to cover all of the basics here.
Mhm.
But I do recommend that if you're microdosing, look at microdosing, that you do it within a framework. So I don't personally recommend microdosing and then just getting in the car and driving to work, for example. I recommend within a practice, within a meditation practice, a movement practice, or a combination, a journaling practice. And so microdosing is about usually a tenth of a dose, although everyone has different dose tolerances. So it's very hard to say, oh, you should take this or that. But when I have someone come to me who's new to microdosing, we do a pretty in-depth intake form, and we look at, also you have to be aware microdosing is not for everyone. There are medical contraindications you need to be aware of. But we look at what people's why do you want to start microdosing? And then we create protocols and like blueprints, individual blueprints for people to work with microdosing in a way that really helps support what their goals are, whether those
Mhm.
are leadership goals or life business goals, or they're really calling in the improvement of a relationship, whether that's at work or at home, for example. So I always like to say that when you know your why, you know your way.
Mhm.
Macrodosing is doing deep dives into the psyche, much more preparation. And if you're not familiar with journeying, then I do recommend having a guide support that as well. I do have also written guides on my website how to have a safe psychedelic journey at home. But if you are looking to
I saw
journey,
you added a playlist too, which I subscribe to.
oh sweet. Yeah, and there's just more things to take into consideration with set and setting. And, legalities, we have to remember we still are living in this very strange time of prohibition. Although things are opening up, we're still sort of in the gap. And then also just keeping in mind, to start low and go slow. And then you don't need to, take a huge heroic dose on your first time journeying.
Especially if you're doing it by yourself, right?
Mhm,
So,
mhm.
mhm. Wonderful. Well, yeah, that's a wealth of information, and I love that you shared those resources with the listeners. So, I'll put those in the show notes too. So, if you guys are interested in finding out about her microdosing program, you can look that up, or any of the resources she's just mentioned. Um, so, what else is top of mind as far as what you want the listeners to know about, what you do and how it can really help transform their life?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Well, I'm just coming out of a 3-month mastermind program that has just gone so incredibly well. I've had 32 people in this program, and we've just been on such a journey together. And I always feel like such a student at, bowing at the altars of all of the participants that come and show up and to train with me. And so much every time. So I'm incredibly grateful that people trust me in that process. And I'm really, really missing in-person retreats right now. Just, we've been on a sort of forced sabbatical with COVID, and I'm just so ready to get back into retreat space. So if you are listening and you work for a company that is interested in doing team building offsites that may or may not include psychedelics. So I run most of my retreats out of the country. But I'm really focused right now on doing more team building retreats for companies in the 20 to 30 people range, and really implementing a lot of the creative problem solving skill sets, as well as team building tools, and really all the leadership training into psychedelic plant medicine retreats where people can journey together and integrate their journeys together, and then also have fun and play together. And right now, where so many teams are working remotely, and with psychedelics becoming so much more sought after as really powerful tools for thinking differently, I'm just so excited to be relaunching my psychedelic leadership retreats. And I can't wait to get back in person with people.
Amazing. No, I think we're all missing that connection. I was actually having a conversation this morning with a group of women, and they were saying just that, like, pandemic fatigue is real. And I think that actually the word they used was pandemic flux, where they just felt like, oh my gosh, I'm in flux and I am so exhausted with, just having to be isolated and not being able to spontaneously, gather with their friends and really have that one-on-one connection with people without fear, without that thing in the back of their mind. Like, if I'm going to this social event, what does that mean for my personal well-being and health? And what does that mean for the personal well-being and health of my family and my friends around me? So
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more that the people are they're ready to gather, but gather in a way that feels safe and that feels
Mhm.
like it's purposeful and it's going to be a deep and meaningful event, as opposed to just, I don't think anybody's walking out of their front door, just for a casual thing anymore. I think it's really put our life and in perspective in that way.
Yeah. Yep.
Mhm.
And that's why I think it's really important, and we know through the research with psychedelics that it fosters greater interconnection. And so this is interesting, right? Because you can be journeying alone and cultivating a microdosing practice alone, but this is, I would say, also, a huge, huge influence on my work is the work of Pema Chodron and her teacher Trogam Trungpa Rinpoche, and that lineage of Tibetan Buddhism I've been studying for about 15 years.
Mhm.
And so when you said, the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection. We know that there are practices, so I'll just offer this practice up to your listeners who are feeling isolated and alone. And you could do this with microdosing or without. But when you have a moment where you're feeling just down, low mood, whatever it is you're struggling with, isolation, and it's feeling really hard, you can just close your eyes and connect to the greater vision of all the other people around the world right now that are just like you, going through that same experience, and you send them this good wish. It's You don't have to use the word prayer if that doesn't resonate for you, but like just like that good wish that they find a relief, even for just a few moments of suffering in their day to day. And that's actually proven by science to help lift our own spirits, that it does heal. When we send healing to other people, it actually does heal ourselves, and fosters connection in a very isolated time. And so it's rituals like that that are really powerful, and also so powerful when we combine with plant medicines and with psychedelics.
Mhm. That's so beautiful. I feel ultimately what you're also speaking of is that, you're not alone. You're not alone on
Mhm.
this journey. There's so many other people that are in the same place feeling a similar thing. And the more that we're able to connect with our inner leadership and ourselves in a deep way, in a meaningful way, we don't feel alone, even if we are in isolation, that we're able to connect with a higher power, a source, whatever people would like to, whatever resonates best for people that feels truest for them. But there is something larger that's always with us, and that we are able to feel connected to our communities and the people that we love, even if we're not in their physical presence. So I love that message.
Mm. Mm.
Good. Well, I love this conversation so much, and I do have one other big question for you that I want to dig into, because I think it's really important, especially for leaders, to just humanize leaders. We are all in our own stage of development, unfolding, and growth. So, what's a big challenge that you're working with right now, either in your business or in your personal life, that would really allow you to open up to that next level of service?
Yeah, I think less is more. That's the big thing that I'm learning, is that staying in my own lane. There's so much that I'm passionate about and so much that I want to do. So, like refining, I feel like the more that I refine, the more effective that I am. I'm like harnessing my power as I refine, refine, refine. And the more that I spread myself out and say yes to all the things that I know in my gut, the intuitive sense is like, this is overextending yourself. Don't do it. So really getting so clear on my why, my purpose, my vision, and then just staying in my lane is such a big part of that, so that it frees me up to have more balance, more playtime, more beach time, more journey time. And that's the filling up of my own cup, which is so necessary, because if you're not getting enough sleep at night, then your leadership cognitive and your cognitive skills are going to just go right out the window. It's we
Mhm.
know that now. So really prioritizing self-care and prioritizing slowing down, I think, is going to be the new way forward, because we're forcing ourselves through that nexus point into a healthier way of being, because people are burnt out, and I'm seeing
Mhm.
burnout happen all over the place right now. And so that's getting really clear too. And it's understandable. There's a lot of fear. People are worried, where is my income going to come from? The pandemic has thrown a whole sort of wrench in a lot of people's plans. And that's really the time. Like, these are the time to cultivate these skill sets of flexibility, adaptability, resilience, so that we can pivot, so that we can hold our vision and be able to navigate in the ways that we need to adjust to be able to stay fulfilled. And just the reminder for everyone that this is going to come to pass so freaking fast. Like our
Mhm.
lives, I'm talking about, not the pandemic. We are going to be soil in the dirt so soon. So it's like, how do you want to spend the days of your life? Do you want to look back and say, wow, I really could have worked even more? Or are you going to look back and say, wow, I really enjoyed my life, I really lived it into my life and enjoyed it? And finding that connection on a daily basis, I think, is really important. And humor, bringing a lot of humor into our daily lives, because at a certain point things are so crazy that you cannot
Mhm.
not laugh at it, where you're like, wow, this is
It's
like so
literally ridiculous.
absurd.
We're all
Yeah.
ridiculous humans.
So bringing more humor and more joy in, I think, is just so essential right now.
Mhm. No, I love that so much. All right. Well, and the last question I have for you is, what has been your biggest win recently? I always love to leave it on a high note.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I am 1 week away tomorrow from wrapping up my 3-month program. And I would say, like, this was running a program with 32 people, which is a pretty big group for a mastermind program. I would say it was a really big win. I'm super happy with how it went. And yeah, I'm just grateful for all the continued learning, and I'm going to be restructuring it a little bit and then relaunching it in January. So if anyone's interested in that, it's my signature program, it's Microdosing Mastermind, and we combine all of these pieces with what it means to cultivate a daily practice, and weaving in different rituals, the science with spirit, and ultimately helping people cultivate their vision, get clear on what's important, foster emotional resilience, mental resilience, physical resilience for these enormous times of change. And so, yeah, I'm incredibly proud of that program, and happy to have a pretty long wait list for January already.
Amazing. No, that's great. And how can the listeners get in touch with you to find out all about these great programs and how to work with you? What's your
Yeah,
best
so I
contact?
livefreelaurid.com is my home base. I'm currently in the process of doing a pretty big revamp where we're separating out psychedelicleadership.com. And normally, I I'm on Instagram every day, except right now my account is under review because of this silly imposter account that is trying to pose at me. So hopefully within
You're
the
like,
next
what a
like
huge
24
compliment
hours.
that somebody's literally copying you out in the world that you're doing such fabulous things.
I was like, it's probably some like algorithm or something. I don't know, some bot
Yeah,
or
so
something.
random. Yeah,
So random. Yeah.
good. All right. Well, amazing. Well, I just want to thank you so much for being here today and for sharing all your wisdom. It was so insightful. And I want to thank the listener. Thank you for listening all the way through to the end here. We really appreciate you spending this time with us. And I'd love to see you again next week. And as always, I'm also inviting you to join the Wednesday night virtual breathwork circle that I host. It's at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. It's co-ed. And I would love for you to just come in and check it out. It's a great way to just connect with community, to come and breathe and just get some relief from all of this pandemic flex that we've been talking about. So thanks again. And until next time, guys, live in gratitude and be light. All right. Bye for now.
Aloha. Thank you.
Thank you.